The moment Fergie opened her mouth and whispered about yachts, secrets, and royal attention, Meghan's perfectly polished fairy tale cracked, and what spilled out sent shockwaves straight through palaces, mansions, and reputations. Here's the thing nobody is saying out loud, but everyone is thinking, this was never just a casual comment. This was a calculated strike. A slow, smiling, silk-wrapped bomb dropped by a woman who knows exactly where the skeletons float and exactly when to nudge them back to the surface. It all started so sweetly, almost boring. Fergie glowing, laughing, doing the rounds for her latest redemption arc, the interviews, the book promo, the soft-focused smiles about growth and healing. She looked harmless, disarming. And then someone asked the question they shouldn't have dared to ask. Meghan, just her name, and everything changed. The room shifted. People felt it before they understood it. The pause, that tilt of the head, that slow inhale. And then, two words that landed like a warning shot. Oh, Meghan. Not anger, not bitterness, something colder, something knowing. And then came the story. Not names, never names, just memories. Summers on yachts. Young women dazzled by power and proximity, glamour dripping like champagne off sun-kissed decks, people dressing up, networking, chasing the right gaze, hoping the right man noticed, hoping doors would open. And then, the dagger wrapped in velvet. Faces from those summers, she said, ended up in very unexpected places. Palaces, corridors of power, places you don't reach without knowing how to play the game. That's all it took. The internet detonated. Suddenly, everyone was digging. Screenshots, old blog posts, whispered guest lists. One yacht trip from the early 2000s became the centerpiece. The infamous floating playground of models, billionaires, Hollywood hopefuls, and royalty-adjacent men. Greece, Monaco, sun, excess, opportunity. And floating right there in the speculation storm? A young actress with ambition in her eyes. Meghan. And hovering uncomfortably close in the rumors? Prince Andrew. Nobody said anything outright. Nobody needed to. The implication did all the damage on its own. And here's the cruel brilliance of it. Fergie never accused. She never confirmed. She simply reminded the world that fairy tales don't begin at the palace gates. They begin long before, in places the palace prefers to forget. When paparazzi tried to corner her the next day, she didn't retreat. She smiled, smirked, really, and dropped the line that lit everything back on fire. Every fairy tale starts somewhere. Translation? You can rewrite the story, but you can't erase the prologue. Inside the palace, panic didn't walk in. It sprinted. This was the worst possible timing. Unity was already fragile, image already bruised, and now an old duchess was casually cracking open a past the monarchy had helped carefully sand down. But the real question burned hotter than the rumors themselves. Why now? The answer? History, hurt, and a grudge that never quite healed. Behind closed doors, the resentment had been simmering for years. Fergie, long treated like the embarrassing aunt of the royal family, never forgot how Meghan entered the fold, confident, commanding attention, rewriting rules without asking permission. And then came the moment that sealed it, Eugenie's wedding. A day meant to be about one bride, swallowed whole by another woman's announcement. Pregnancy headlines exploding while confetti was still falling. Fergie watched her daughter's moment evaporate in real time, hijacked by a narrative that wasn't hers. To Fergie, it wasn't coincidence. It was pattern. So when the opportunity came, a microphone, a memory, a smile, she didn't hesitate. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the reaction was nuclear. Meghan didn't just get angry. She went feral. Phones buzzing non-stop. Crisis meetings. Voices raised behind mansion walls. Old photos being hunted down like contraband. PR teams scrambling to erase a chapter the internet was already archiving forever. And the Andrew connection? Poison. Absolute poison. Even a whisper of overlap was enough to make allies flinch and doors quietly close. Hollywood smelled blood. Headlines piled up like wreckage. Royal panic. Montecito meltdown. Furious duchess. And then silence. Meghan vanished online. Websites frozen. Projects paused. No inspirational quotes. No soft focus resilience posts. That kind of silence doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. Word leaked that she was locked in strategy mode, replaying every angle, calling every contact. Even reaching out to Eugenie, a move so awkward it practically vibrated with tension. Caught between mother and cousin-in-law, Eugenie became collateral damage in a war she never signed up for. And just when it seemed like things couldn't escalate further, Fergie's camp started whispering, not denying, not apologizing, hinting. More stories, more clarity, more truth if needed. And that's when the real terror set in. Because for years, Meghan's team had worked overtime to polish the origin story. Actress meets prince, love conquers all, destiny. But the hustle years, the networking, the yachts, the rooms where power circulated like currency, those were supposed to stay buried. But now the royal code had been broken, and once one person breaks it, everyone remembers where they buried their own shovels. Meghan's worst fear was unfolding in real time, her past colliding violently with her brand. And she wasn't going to lie down. Reports said she exploded the moment the story peaked. Pacing, texts fired off like missiles, fury crackling through the house. After everything she gave, this was the repayment? But anger wasn't the endgame, control was. The counter-narrative began forming. Bigger, louder, strategic. A plan to reclaim the spotlight, rewrite the framing, and drown out implication with confession. Rumors swirled of cameras, of executives, of a truth-telling moment meant to flip the board completely, not a response. A takeover. The problem? Fergie wasn't blinking. She leaned back, smiled wider, and kept speaking in riddles. Truth shouldn't scare anyone, should it? And just like that, the lines were drawn. Two duchesses. Two versions of survival. One fought her way in, one survived being pushed out. And now they were circling the same story, each determined to own it. The internet picked sides with frightening speed. Hashtags exploded. Comparisons turned brutal. The duchess who stayed, the duchess who walked. Compassion versus calculation. Old photos resurfaced like ghosts. Glamorous snapshots ripped from context and fed to a public that didn't care about nuance, only drama. Harry fumed. Protective. Furious. Trapped between loyalty and fallout. Every attempt to shield Meghan only seemed to pour fuel on the fire. Still, Meghan smiled for cameras. Calm, controlled, radiant. The mask of defiance polished to perfection. But behind it, pressure, cracks. The knowledge that this time she wasn't fighting tabloids. She was fighting someone who knew the palace and the price of defying it. And just as Meghan prepared to speak, to finally seize the mic, whispers multiplied. Former aides, old acquaintances, people from those early days suddenly remembering details they hadn't shared before. What began as one woman's reminder had become a full-scale reckoning. And this was only the opening act. The whispers didn't creep in quietly. They stormed the room like uninvited guests who knew exactly where to sit. One voice became two. Two became 10, and suddenly the silence Meghan had been relying on turned into the loudest sound of all. Because here's the ugly truth about secrets. They don't die. They wait. As Meghan's team fine-tuned lighting angles and talking points, something else was happening behind the curtain. People from the past, not enemies, not friends, just witnesses, started remembering out loud. Old assistants, former social climbers, industry hangers-on who had watched those early years unfold from the sidelines. And their stories weren't explosive on their own. That's what made them dangerous. They were casual, matter of fact. Oh yeah, that was the scene back then. Yachts weren't scandals, they were networking hubs. Access wasn't shameful, it was strategy. But once those words hit the public, the narrative twisted fast. What Meghan once framed as ambition suddenly got reframed as calculation. And the internet? It doesn't wait for nuance. It picks a villain and runs. Meanwhile, Fergie never raised her voice. That was the most unsettling part. She floated through interviews like a woman who had already survived worse storms and learned one brutal lesson: you don't need to shout when the truth echoes on its own. She spoke about lessons, about patience, about how the crown rewards loyalty and punishes impatience. She laughed softly when asked if she regretted anything she'd said. Regret? No, she looked almost relieved, as if something long overdue had finally been released. And behind that smile was a warning only insiders truly understood. She wasn't protecting anyone anymore. Inside Montecito, the mood shifted from outrage to urgency. This wasn't just gossip now. This was legacy damage. Meghan's carefully curated image, the wounded outsider, the compassionate disruptor, was losing control of the frame. People weren't asking what did they do to her anymore. They were asking what did she want? That question alone can end careers. Harry felt it slipping too. The interviews that once sparked sympathy now looked rehearsed. The grievances that once sounded brave were starting to feel repetitive. And worst of all, the palace wasn't even responding. They didn't need to. Silence was doing the work for them. That's when Meghan made the call. No slow rollout, no teaser clips, No controlled leaks. She wanted one moment, one decisive strike. A conversation big enough to drown out every whisper and reclaim the narrative in a single breath. This wasn't going to be about yachts or rumors or royal etiquette. This was going to be about womanhood, about survival, about what ambitious women are forced to do in rooms where power decides their worth. And for a split second, it almost worked. Sympathy flickered back to life. People leaned in. Maybe this was the moment she'd flip the script again, but the palace knows timing better than anyone. Just as anticipation peaked, more voices surfaced. Not accusations, recollections, patterns, repetition. Stories lining up a little too neatly. And suddenly Meghan's truth began competing with other truths. And in that chaos, certainty vanished. That's the danger of telling your story too many times. Eventually, people start counting versions. Fergie, watching from a distance, never celebrated. She didn't have to. She had already won the only game she cared about, breaking the illusion that anyone enters the royal orbit without understanding the cost. And here's the cruel irony, Meghan wasn't wrong about everything. The institution is cold, the system is ruthless, outsiders are rarely protected, but when your past is filled with ambition sharpened in the same rooms you later condemn, credibility fractures. The public doesn't reward complexity, it rewards clarity. By the time Meghan finally sat down in front of the cameras, the atmosphere had shifted. Every word was scrutinized. Every pause felt strategic. Every tear questioned. She spoke beautifully, controlled, articulate, wounded but strong. And still, something was missing. Trust. Not because people hated her, but because they no longer knew what to believe. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't a feud anymore. It was a collision between two survival styles. One learned to endure quietly and wait decades for the right moment. The other learned to speak loudly and reshape reality in real time. The crown favors patience. The world favors spectacle. But when spectacle meets memory, memory usually wins. As weeks passed, the headlines softened, but the damage lingered. Deals hesitated, invitations slowed. Allies grew cautious. Meghan was still powerful, still influential, but no longer untouchable. The fairy tale hadn't shattered completely, but the glass was cracked beyond repair. Fergie faded back into her lane, mission accomplished without fingerprints. She never needed applause. She needed acknowledgement that she had seen it all before, survived it, and refused to be erased. And Meghan? She kept moving forward, because stopping was never an option. Reinvention has always been her strongest skill. But this time, reinvention came with limits. The past had caught up, and once it does, it never fully lets go. This wasn't about yachts. It wasn't even about Andrew. It was about power. Who earns it? Who borrows it? And who gets punished for reaching too fast? And in the end, the most brutal lesson of all emerged quietly, without scandal or shouting, in the royal world. You can leave the crown, but the crown never leaves you.